Hey, what's up guys? JB here. Now before we get into the battle, real quick, I do just want to say that I am going to be considering the forthcoming job update to Agrias's cleric sub-job. That is currently the only sub-job, between these two units that we are aware of so far from the JP side. So I just want to put that little mini disclaimer, since some of the things that I talk about in today's video will not be available on day one of Agrias's EX. So with that said guys, let's just jump right into the battle. And for this battle, I've created an all-new round here for tanking capabilities, which you can see here. And this one we're going to go through one by one through the various tanking attributes, and we're going to see who comes out on top. And this will actually get us up to 5 total rounds today, so we'll have even more points of comparison than ever before. Now, kicking off the battle here in round 1, we're going to be talking hit points. And Agrias's base HP is actually quite crazy. It's almost 4,400 hit points. And as of today, that is actually second overall in the game, behind only Engelbert. Agrias is going to have just about 700 hit points more in her base total than Snow here, who is coming in at just under 3,700. What is that actually going to mean for these units, though? Well, in a practical build, I'm going to say maybe you're somewhere between 30 to 35% in a hit point modifier. And in that case, Agrias is going to end up with about 1,000 more hit points in a full completed build than Snow. Moving on to my second category here, we're going to talk about defense. And the defense that I have here is going to be including passive abilities that they have available to them. Snow is definitely going to have the edge on this category. He's getting up to 30 defense innately, including his passive. While Agrias is definitely not a slouch here either. She can actually get up to 18 base defense with her Holy Nice Protection passive ability. Moving on to the spirit category. And when it comes to spirit, there's really no comparison. Agrias has one of the highest spirit totals in War of the Visions. She gets 25 innately in her EX job. And then one of her main passives will get her up to 37 spirit, and believe it or not, she can actually double up on spirit passives and get up to a total of 52 spirit before we even get into gearing. Snow, of course, really doesn't have anything to speak of when it comes to spirit. He's coming in at 0 innately. He doesn't have any passives to bring it up any further. So Agrias will take this category very, very easily. Now, in terms of the damage resist for these units, they both actually will have areas where they are going to excel and are much better than the other one. And while Agrias has that very nice magic resist at 20%, I'm actually going to give this category to Snow. I just think that his overall resist package is a lot better. He has nice resists in slash damage and missile, and he has a very high 15% pierce resist, which is a resistance that is not all that common within the game. He is weak when it comes to magic resistance here at -5, but I just think overall he has more areas and more different damage types that he's good at than Agrias does. Now, staying on the resist frontier, what about any innate single target or area resist that these units have access to? Now, actually, neither of these units have access to any area resist, either within passives or within their masteries. However, Agrias is actually picking up 20 single target resistance from her Mastery 2 ability. And that's definitely going to help bulk her up quite a bit, when it comes to those kind of single tile attacks. And she's going to take this category here. Now, my next two categories are very important for any tank in the game, and that is regarding their hate drawing capabilities. Now, Snow actually gets 10 innate hate that he picks up between his mastery ability and one of his passives in his EX job. And he is actually the first tank to reach that 10 innate hate plateau in the game thus far. Now, when you do have that hate innately, the advantage of that is that it cannot be dispelled by various skills in the game. Now, Agrias also does have some hate. She actually picks up 5 innate hate from her EX jobs. But Snow is actually going to take this one when it comes to passive hate very easily. Now, when it comes to active hate generation, once that innate hate has worn out, do they have any other abilities where they can augment that any further? Snow actually doesn't have anything in his kit that can do that. However, Agrias does. From her Paladin sub-jump, she does have access to Taunting Blade, and that will get her an active 12 hate on top of what she has innately. And Ice, of course, does have the Freyevia Vision card, which will give the unit wearing it up to 5 passive hate as well. So I think at that point, it is a question whether you would need any more hate at that point. But, maybe it could be significant for PvE situations or maybe in some longer drawn-out PvP battles. So in that case, I am going to give this category here to Agrias. Now, my next one up here is, I think, a category that some people out there might overlook, and that is looking at their actual counter abilities. And specifically, do they actually have a counter which offers something tanking related, something like damage mitigation or maybe an HP absorb of some kind? In Snow's case, he actually doesn't. All of his counters are actually offensive and retaliation focused. Agrias, on the other hand, does get access to Paladin's Guard, which can mitigate up to 45% of the incoming damage on any physical attack. Now, Agrias does have auto cure from her cleric sub-job as well. However, that heal is based on her magic value, which isn't very high at all. You may be able to come up with a build to actually make it usable, but I'm not sure it would be worth it. You would really need to invest a lot into magic. Either way though, that Paladin's Guard is enough to get her the win in this category. Now my last one up here is going to be something that we've seen a lot more focus on and options available in the game, over the past year or so, and that is going to be debuff resistance. Now obviously there are different categories of debuff resistance in the game. Snow is going to take this category though. He is the only one that has any debuff resistance in his kit, and he does have an active buff which can make him immune to defense breaks. So Agrias is going to take the first round of the battle in the all-important tanking category. She's picking up 5 points to 4 here. And when it comes to that pure raw tanking capability, I do think that Agrias is edging Snow out here slightly, at least on paper. But we can sort of see the story unfolding here already, that each unit does have sort of their own specialty when it comes to tanking prowess. Snow will definitely hold the line much better against any physically focused team, while Agrias with her high spirit and magic resistance will be much better when it comes to magical scaled opponents. Alright guys, we're moving on to the next round, and this one is going to be all about the utility. What effects and skills are these units bringing to help turn the tide in battle? Now my first category here is an important one, and that is, do they have access to a barrier break? We actually do have a couple of important units that are going to be coming into the game that do rely heavily on 50% all damage barriers, and that's going to be Final Fantasy XIII's Lightning and Revolution Glaciella. So having this kind of utility is definitely going to be more important than ever before. Now Agrias will take this first category here. She actually does get access to a barrier break within her EX jobs, and that's going to be her Job 25 ability. Now Snow, on the other hand, as of today, he does not have access to any barrier break. Now my next 3 categories here are all related to various stat breaks, and Agrias is going to take all 3 of these categories. She actually does have access to a skill called Full Break, and that one actually breaks your attack, magic, spirit, and defense all at once, which is very nice. Now Agrias actually does have access to an agility break on top of that as part of her cleric subjob kit. Now Snow, on the other hand, he doesn't really have much going on when it comes to breaking. He does have an attack break and really not much else. So Agrias is definitely going to take these 3 categories here very easily. Staying on the debuffing front here, we're going to talk about Imperils next. And Snow is going to take this category. Within his main sub-job, he does get access to a single target resistance break of 30. Now that Imperil actually does come post-damage, so unfortunately his auto AI, he won't be looking to prioritize this one all that often, but still very nice utility nonetheless, and could be great for something like guild raids, for example. Moving on to the next category here, and crowd control via ailment infliction is another very nice utility that a unit can have access to, and both of these units actually do have some form of that. Of course, Agrias has her famous range 5 line AoE Confuse, while Snow has a range 3 line area of effect stun that he can use. And both of those, being limit bursts, actually have a very high chance of landing on your opponent. Agrias actually does set herself apart here in this particular category. Much of her main kit is actually dedicated towards ailment infliction. She has options there for silence, disable, and stop as well. And within Paladin, she actually has access to a stun on top of that. So Agrias will definitely take this category here. Now my last 3 categories here are different forms of dispels in the game, and Agrias was going to take these first 2 categories. She has access to both a re-raise and protect status dispels, and notably that re-raise dispel does come on a cross AoE attack as part of her EX Judgment Blade. And importantly, it does dispel prior to the damage, so even if she misses her target, it will retain value. Now Snow, on the other hand, he does have access to a general dispel, and that's going to remove tank hate that's been buffed on, or really any buff in the game. And to be honest, there have been quite a few that have been added in that are extremely powerful. So always nice to have this sort of utility in your kit. And this dispel is actually on one of his main attacks, so he will actually be looking to use this quite often in autoplay. So not entirely unexpected here, Agrias is actually going to run away with this round quite easily at 7 points to 2. I think when it comes to utility, Agrias is just one of the better units in the game with all of the different things that she has access to in her EX job, and is definitely one of the true highlights for that unit. Alright guys, we're moving on to round 3 here, and this is going to be the support rounds. And here we're going to be looking at how these units can help themselves or their allies in the fight in terms of buffs or heals or etc. Now, the first two categories I have on my list here are stat-related things like defense, spirit, attack, and magic buffs. And Agrias actually has a few different options here, for both herself and allies that she could use, while Snow actually just has a personal defense and spirit buff. So Agrias has that and more, so I'm going to give both of these two categories here to Agrias. Now my next one is going to be innate healing capability. What do they bring to themselves or to the team to help improve their overall sustain? And this is definitely one of the highlights for Snow. Similar to Leela the Bold's, he does have an auto heal back ability that will trigger when he goes below 20% HP. Now on top of that, he does have access to breathing technique from the Pugilist sub-job, and that is a flat 30% heal to himself. Now Agrias does have a couple of options here when it comes to healing. I think the most notable is actually her party regen ability. Now oftentimes this is a skill that would get turned off, if you were looking to have Agrias be out front and tank for your team. But if you don't actually have Agrias in that tanky role, I think this is actually very nice utility to have, especially when you consider the high hit point pools that these units can attain. Now she does actually have some other healing options available to her within her cleric sub-job. Again though, her magic value isn't really there to take advantage of those and leverage those all that well, so I'm actually going to give this category here to Snow. Now my next one here is a pretty big differentiation point between these units, and that is access to barriers, either for their self or ones that they can actually give to their teammates. Snow actually doesn't have any barrier available to him at all in his kit. This one though is a real strength for Agrias. She has several different options, when it comes to barriers, including two that she can give to the party. Within her main job sub, she has access to a 35% 3-hit magic barrier that she can give to herself and the team. She does also have access to a 50% all damage barrier that lasts for 1 hit, and that one is actually coming from her Cleric's Calamity Guard skill as part of that sub-job's recent overhaul on the JP side. Now my next three categories here are going to be buffs of various kinds. The first one is going to be resist buffs. Now Agrias does have a party-based light or dark resist buff that she can give from her cleric sub-job. Both are very useful resists to have access to, especially for Guild War. You think about all the different light and dark teams out there. Snow on the other hand, he has a resist buff as well. It's a self-only area resist buff of 20 that he can put on. I'm going to give Snow a slim edge on this one, just because I think that area resist is a little bit more universally useful and applicable. Now the next one up here is a defense penetration buff. Agrias, she doesn't have anything available to her whatsoever when it comes to defense pen, so Snow is going to take this one pretty easily. He gets access to a 40 defense pen buff for 3 turns within his main kit. Snow is actually going to take this accuracy buff category as well. He has the ninja sub job, so he can use Decider of Fate for a 60 accuracy bonus. Now my last two categories here of the support round are going to be ailment and debuff support related. Now, just as we saw, Agrias was very focused in terms of doling out different ailments towards the enemy, she does actually have very nice options to protect her team against those very same ailments. And that's going to be that same Calamity Guard skill that we talked about. And that's actually going to nullify the majority of status ailments in the game, including some very annoying ones like Frostbite and Stop. Now my last category here is that debuff dispel, and actually Agrias has that as well, and that's going to be part of her enhanced cleric cure that she's going to get here in a couple of months. And what that does is it's going to remove any debuffs that are applied on that target in addition to healing them as well. Definitely I'd say a little bit more relevant from a manual perspective. I don't think that her AI is going to be looking to use this in any situation, but definitely very nice to have, nonetheless. So again, Agrias is going to be taking this support round. She's taking it 5-4. Is this battle going to end up being a blowout? Let's see what happens here in the final 2 rounds. Alright, we're on to round 4 here, and this is the damage round. And we're going to be looking at their pure damage related attributes and see how they're going to stack up against one another. Now my first category here on the list is going to be their innate attack value, and this one actually looks pretty close. We have a 543 for Agrias and a 548 here for Snow, and this is actually including passive abilities that they have access to. So I'd say this is more or less a wash here. There's only about 5 attack difference here. I am going to actually give this category to Snow though, and that's because his base attack is significantly better at 397. It's a very high total for a tank, so I'm going to give the attack category here to Snow. My next category here on the list is going to be access to different damage types within their kit. Always nice flexibility to have for any damage dealer. Now they both technically have access to 3 different damage types within their kit, Now I'm going to say Agrias, really only has access to one viable damage type, and that's going to be slash damage, though the physical strike-based skill within her cleric subjob is pretty interesting. Now Snow is largely in the same bucket there, he's primarily going to be a strike attacker, but his slashing attacks I think are a little bit more fleshed out, as part of his ninja subjob, so I'm going to give a small edge on this category here to Snow. Now in terms of base accuracy, Snow is going to take this one as well. You can see here he's at that 185 value, and that would be including his Pugilist passive. Now he is actually higher than Agrias even without using that passive, so he's easily going to take this category. Now I will say that Agrias does have access to a 30% hit modifier on her upgraded Judgment Blade, but at the end of the day, accuracy is really not a strength for either of these units. Now my next category up here is going to be modifiers, and Snow is going to take this one as well actually. He can get a conditional 285% modifier on his Pugilist subjob, which is a huge modifier. Agrias, on the other hand, she has access to a few 200% mods within her kit. Now the next category there is kind of tied into this one, and that is going to be modifier buffs, that they might have access to sort of increase their damage any further. And Snow will take this one yet again. He has access to a 25 strike attack mod and a 25 wind killer, across his various skills. Now, a very important category for any damage dealer out there is going to be their penetrations, when it comes to either defense or spirit, or their particular damage types. And both of these units actually are completely lacking, when it comes to defense penetration or strike or slash penetrations as well. Remember though that Snow actually does have access to a 40 defense penetration buff that we talked a little bit about earlier. And at the end of the day, that's actually going to make him a much more dangerous damage dealer. All right, let's quickly go through the last three here. Starting AP, this one is just basically a wash. They both start out with relatively low numbers here, 24 and 22 respectively. The next one is range, and I will say overall Snow is much more limited in his range. He can technically get up to 5 range with his ninja subjob, but really it's not an overall strength for them. Most of his attacks are actually within the 2 to 3 range zone. Agrias, she's actually pretty limited in range as well, though her Limit Burst and Taunting Blade both get up to 5, so I'm going to give her the edge in range. Now my last category of the damage round is going to be a guaranteed hit. Do they have access to one? Now Agrias, as we know, she never had one, and within her EX job, she doesn't get one either. She does have that 30% hit mod that we talked about, which will help her out a little bit, but when it comes to evade units, she's going to need a lot more than that. Now Snow, on the other hand, one of his main attacks that also is that Dispel ability that we talked about, which is definitely nice for a tank to have access to, a unit that you generally won't be focused on your accuracy. Other tanks like Joom have put that to good effect, for example. And Snow is going to take this overall round here 7-2 in a blowout fashion. He's really a much more accomplished and definitely a much more dangerous damage dealer at the end of the day. All right, we're on to our final round, and this is X Factors. And here we're going to look at attributes that maybe don't necessarily fit into any of the other categories, and maybe a few things in here which may be easier to overlook. But really, when you look at them and add them up at the end of the day, they do represent a nice value. So as always, my first category here is going to be chaining capability. Snow actually does have access to a 2-hit attack from his main job sub. And technically, he does actually have access to a 2-hit counter ability as well, so I'm going to throw that in there. So he'll take the chaining category here. Unfortunately, Agrias doesn't have any chaining capability whatsoever. Now, next one is always a big one, and that is access to Immortal Spirit or Re-Raise. Now, Snow actually does have access to Immortal Spirit. He has 2 casts of it, which is very nice, and that's going to give him the edge there. Now, in terms of the TMR here, I think that Agrias' TMR actually still holds up very well. It's a nice armor piece to build off of, in terms of its stats, and it comes with a great effect that gives both Protect and Shell to the wearer. Now, I don't think that I would go out of my way to pull this particular one, but if you are pulling for Agrias, I think it is worth building out and building up the effect on it. Now, in terms of Snow's TMR, I do like his as well, but I just think that his is a little bit more niche use case. The next category up here is mobility, and Snow is going to take this one. He does have the ninja subjob that we've talked a little bit about, and that comes with the Shikuchi passive, which will get him up to a 4-2 movement. Agrias, on the other hand, she doesn't have any way to improve her innate mobility. All right, next one on my list here is AP cost reduction, and this is definitely something that they've been giving out a little bit more often, over the past year of the game. And I definitely always love it when a unit has access to this. Helps them draw out their AP a little bit more and just get off and string off a few more attacks in battle. Now, Agrias actually does get access to that within her EX job. She is going to get access to a 20% AP reduction. That's going to be baked into one of her main passives. Now you could actually think about combining that effect with something like the Mythgraven Blade and an AP Trust Stone set, for example, and that's actually going to cut Agrias' AP costs in half, which is quite significant. Now my next category here is weapon type, and on the one hand I think that I might give this one to Agrias. She is a sword user, and at this point, we have so many swords in the game. Agrias will have access to many different options, which is very nice. But I am actually going to give this one to Snow, and that's because as a fist user, he will be maining that strike damage, which is just a weakness for so many units out there in the game. And really because of that, him not having access to any strike resist penetration really doesn't come back to bite him, like it does in Agrias' case, where tankier / resistant targets are really just going to shut down any damage that she's trying to put out. Now, in terms of their passive abilities, they actually both have a lot of nice passives that they can equip and kind of give you some flexibility in how you can build them out. However, when the Cleric subjob gets overhauled, Agrias actually will have access to 2 different agility-based passives. And I think that actually might be a first in the game. She's going to actually be able to get a bonus of 24% agility, which is quite crazy. And that will actually have her as one of the fastest units in the game, despite not having that high of an innate total. So because of that, I am going to give that category there to Agrias. Now the next X factor on my list here is, do they have their own vision card? And as we all know, Global does get limited bestowed abilities that are exclusive for our version of the game. And we already know that Snow is actually getting a limited bestowed for his vision card that will be coming out tomorrow. And on that, we know he is getting healing power and area resist. Both very nice effects to have access to on a tank. I'm expecting those values to be somewhere maybe in the neighborhood of 10 for each of those, which actually will be pretty significant for him. Now sadly, Agrias never actually had her own vision card on her original run, and it doesn't seem that she'll be getting one now. But if Gumi wants to go ahead and put a limited bestowed ability for her on Fenrir or Odin, I would be all about it. Until that happens though, this category is going to Snow. Now my last category of the round here is going to Agrias, and this is for armor type. And for a frontline unit or a tank, being a plate wearer is just better overall in my view. Not only for wearing something like Kane's or Rob's TMR for their effects, but also for things like Brigandine or Gold Armor +6. So that is going to wrap up the X Factors round here, guys, and Snow is definitely going to take this round as well. He's going to take this one 5-4. Alright, so that is my battle of Agrias versus Snow, guys, and really it was a battle of a couple of titans here for the ice elements. If I'm going straight by the round results here on this one, you guys saw it, Agrias would be winning 3-2. I'm not going to do that though. I do have to couch this just a little bit. Now obviously Agrias is a Swiss Army knife of a unit. She just has so many different things that she can do and do them well, and it really makes her look better on paper than many units out there. And while that's definitely a great strength when it comes to manual play and manual control, but when we're talking autoplay, that kind of flexibility can really be a trade-off in of itself. If you have Agrias tanking, even more so, she's definitely a unit that requires tuning to kind of get her to work optimally and kind of go exactly where you want her to. On the other hand, Snow is just a unit that really works great right out of the box. As we saw within the battle, he's definitely a lot more selfish and self-contained unit. He doesn't really offer a lot of support or utility to the party, but it does just really work great in his case from everything that I've seen. He creates great separation from your team, kind of just bowling forward into the enemy, and that really helps your backline to avoid area of effect attacks. He has great staying power and does great damage, on top of that. I really think that this battle can be that, sometimes less is just more. And I think that him being so focused on that physical tanking and frontline brawling aspect really just becomes a great strength for that unit. I have to say though that Agrias can actually be an immense frontline support unit. I mean, just look at all the different capabilities that we looked at and talked about today. On top of that, she herself is a much better magic focused tank than Snow. And on that same note, I think that Agrias really can help enable Snow to help deal with one of his main weaknesses, which is that magic damage. As we talked about earlier, she does have those barriers that she can give to the team. So there's definitely great synergy, between these two units. As we saw within the battle, there wasn't a ton of overlap, in terms of the things that they brought. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't necessarily need to choose, with these two units. They definitely work great together, and I think that is especially good news for ice mains out there. Now, if I could only go for one of these units and I had to choose one, it's definitely a very tough choice. At the end of the day, I would probably have to go for Snow for meta reasons. Agrias, of course, I would go for nostalgia reasons. The one nice thing that I will say about Snow here is that Even if in the future Ice gets a 100 cost super tank, I think this guy is very usable as a damage dealer, you know, as sort of a frontline bruiser type unit. Overall though, I think that this battle says quite a lot about Agrias. You know, this is a 2-year-old 80 cost unit, and although I definitely was disappointed with a couple of things they decided not to do with her EX, overall she gets a significant upgrade and she's still going to be very good and viable as she always has been. Especially when we consider the global wind meta, which definitely has leaned much more towards the magical side with exclusive units like Summer Jaden and More the Merrier. So I think if you were in the camp of already having Agrias from before, but maybe didn't want to invest in a new ice unit like Snow, I think that you'll definitely have a very usable tank in Agrias and maybe even the preferred one for some scenarios. So again, like I said, 2 winners today, you know, 2 great units on their own. I think they're even better together. And that is going to be my battle of Agrias versus Snow. Do you agree with my overall assessment, or were there any big points that you thought that I overlooked today? Definitely let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video today, hit that like button. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And that's really all that I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there. And I'll see you guys in the next one.